I welcome you all to obviously our Tech Saturday webinar with TimesPro. And today we have a session on a much awaited topic, which is how to build a career in the robotics industry, right? So we have our esteemed speaker with us today, that is Mr. Param Deshpande. A brief introduction on his journey. Param's journey has been nothing short of amazing. He's worked with some top notch teams and companies like Quidditch Labs, Privik Dynamics, and the E-Plane Company, and NewSpace Research. And guess what? He's got some cool stories and experiences to share with us today. Param's all about embedded systems, robotics, and he's got a real knack for the EV and aerospace industry as well. He's worked on some mind blowing stuff like drones, flights, controllers, and even military tech. So if you are curious about, how to kickstart your career in a robotics industry or just love geeking about the cool tech stuff, you are in for a very good treat. So in today's session, Param will be shedding light on how can we basically use critical thinking in robotics. What are the practical strategies to enhance our domain knowledge and how to navigate the future of robotics career. In the end, we will be taking up the questions or queries you might have. So please keep on posting your questions in the Q&A section and we will be taking up from there. So over to you, Mr. Param.
Thanks, Ekta, for the wonderful introduction. That's a very kind introduction that you gave me. So I'm glad to be a part of this session, and I hope you enjoy my experience, and I hope you find everyone in the session finds something worthwhile. Everyone's here on the Saturday afternoon, so I won't take it too long, but I hope you really find the session interesting. Just start sharing with my screen here.
Sure.
This is a fancy code that I found online. Like, I'm not waiting for a computer that passes the Turing test. I'm waiting for the one that intentionally fails it. So, like, we are in the age of machine learning and AI, and I think this is a code that is a very dangerous code, like, wherein things are actually surpassing the human intelligence and we are moving towards super intelligence. So, something that I find very intriguing or something that I find very dangerous. So, I just put it here, that's all. Um, just to get started with the session, I'll be just talking about myself. Then I'll be talking why should you really be interested in robotics? Why is it a good choice? Why is it a bad choice? My experience, personal experience of working in a fast-paced startup, how things have been for me. So I've been in the industry for around 4 years now. How things have changed for me. How is the landscape overall? The domain knowledge needed in robotics, like what kind of subjects should you brush upon, what kind of subjects are really needed, what kind of critical thinking do you need to have a good career in this field. I'll also be talking about finding good opportunities and freelancing opportunities and job opportunities and startups, and my overall journey and some tips and tricks that you can hopefully use for getting a good job or getting a good internship or whatever your career goals might be. And last but not the least, I'll also talk about how it's affecting your work life balance and personal safety. And like, robotics is a field where people get hurt sometimes. There are fatalities, and how you should be mindful of them when you are working in such a critical field. And as always, please feel free to interrupt where necessary. uh, like please feel free to raise questions or unmute or put questions in the chat. I'll try to answer them at the best at the end of the session. So yeah, like Ekta mentioned, these are few of the companies that I've worked with. I've been building and breaking stuff with the following teams. My current company is NewSpace Research. In my current company, we work with defense. We are defense contractors. We supply defense with unmanned vehicles, unmanned. We have some special projects which cannot be disclosed publicly. They are especially for the military. We are also working on pseudo satellites for surveillance purposes. we've signed contracts with the defense. So there are a lot of teams and projects happening in my current company. I am a cross-functional engineer in a few of them. I've worked with drones, multicopters, fixed wings, some some private defense, some private defense projects, and right now I'm also working with the pseudo satellite that we are building for the Indian defense, which is for surveillance purposes. Here I'm mostly working on flight controllers, algorithms, PX4 source code. I do simulations, I work on ROS topics, and I work on swarm logics. I'm a overall like a generalist robotics developer, you can say. My previous company, E-Plane Research, the E-Plane company, we were trying to build a flying car, which was quite an ambitious project at the time, but a startup also needs a lot of funding and resources to actually make that happen. So we got to benchmark where we managed to get a eVTOL, not a passenger base, but a very rudimentary bare minimum VTOL working. So there I had worked on the flight controller for the eVTOL and simulations for the same. Uh, this was based in Chennai, and then before that I was again in Bangalore. I was working with Pravik Dynamics, and we were trying to build EVs. So at the time, during back in 2021, Tesla was just starting to boom. There was a EV hype all of a sudden. So I was very curious about joining the EV industry. So at Pravig, I was working on ECUs for like we were trying to build a few ECUs in house, and we were trying to outsource few ECUs from the big OEMs. So I worked on few topics related to autonomous driving. I worked on few features related to autonomous driving at Pravik, and I was working on developing a gateway or a router inside the vehicle, router between your in-vehicle network and your multimedia. That was my major work at Pravik, and before that, um, these two companies, Quidditch Labs and Taxir. So I was a research student or a working student at the time. Quidditch Labs is a sports broadcast company. They they work with IPL, and they I think recently got into FIFA. They got a contract with FIFA or something. I am like not exactly sure. I haven't been in touch with them since people from that company in a long time. But I think they are working in a lot of countries right now. It's an Indian team, but I think they are trying to diversify a lot outside of India. They are so whatever the IPL overlays that you see, the drone shots that you see the stadium views, you see the spider cameras, the drone views in every IPL match. So Quidditch has got the contract from BCCI for that tech. So that was so when I was working there, it was a very rudimentary and very bare minimal, bare bones kind of concept at the time. I was working on Kalman filters and stabilizing the graphical overlays of your visuals on the live feed. So that was pretty interesting because everything was happening live, like with the drone feed live, and then you have to overlay the graphics on that live, and you have to make sure that the graphics are stable on top of your feed. So that was a interesting work as well. And this fifth company, it was a freelancing project kind of. So they were trying to make drone parachutes, and it was entirely outsourced to me. I found them via Internsala or something like that. That was in 2019, 2020. So like I had worked with them for quite a while to make a self-deploying parachute for a drone. This has been the gist of my professional journey so far, and I've learned quite a lot of things from each of these teams and failed and burned a lot of stuff um, and like innovated a few stuff as well. This one quote that always has like strikes out in my mind is that robotics runs on smokes. So you let the smoke out and things stop working, right? Like how as humans we run on blood and we run on we are made of flesh and blood. Robotics is made up of smoke. So that's a very funny quote that I find, and I just like to put it. Um, you guys can like please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Um, it's or email. You can email me or connect with me on GitHub. I'll be sharing this PPT at the end of the session, so you can have this PPT as a reference. And feel free to ask me any questions post if they are not covered in this session. I've given a few of these sessions like these, and I've always started with the question like, why should anyone ever pursue a career in robotics? What's in this field for me? Why should I really be bothered with it? So I would like to really say, why should anyone not pursue robotics? Because it is a competitive field for now. It's not so easy to get into a robotics company as compared to an IT company or a management company. You need to have some degree of skill sets to have a career in robotics. You need to have expensive tooling, you need to have components, you need to have physical stuff, mechanical stuff, electronics stuff. You need to be comfortable with all the three domains, four domains, and you need to have a big amount of inventory. So personally, if you don't have hands-on exposure on this, you would not be doing really well in this field, or it would be difficult to have a very great career in this field. It's hard to find people with the right skill sets, and there are very few people who will train you. You need to physically go to places where they teach robotics. You can't all the time have online lectures for robotics. You need to have a little hands-on experience. That is how I had learned. I had to find like during my pre-college days or during my engineering days, I had to find places where they actually taught robotics properly. Very few people will teach you the niche parts of robotics and how do you actually operate with machines, the tiny minuscule parts that makes things work like over a brute force. So there are not many people who will actually teach you how do you work with this, work properly in this field, and it's good to have some good deal of mentorship in this field. The last point is like one of the last points is that remote work gets a bit of remote work is not really possible in this field. You often need to be there on the field, or you need to be there on the ground to work with this. You need to see whatever you have programmed or whatever you have written is actually working, is actually obeying the laws of physics, is actually obeying the real world scenario. So this is a live thing. It's interacting with the environment around us. People can get hurt if you don't do this properly. If you mess things up, people can really get hurt. Sometimes people might die. Things might get burned. There'll be a loss of money, inventory. So these are some of the things why I feel not everybody is cut out for robotics, and if someone feels that they are not really comfortable with all of these challenges that the field provides, maybe other fields would be a better suitable fit for them. And then comes the reason, why should anyone bother pursuing with this? So it's a growing segment. Every other day you see new companies popping up with robotics, this, robotics, that. Economy is booming in this field for now. Everything is going to automate eventually. We now have self-driving cars. We now have factory automations. We have home automations. Everything is eventually moving to automation. Human labor is going down and down over time. The market is very big worldwide. You learn robotics in India, you can apply for jobs worldwide. That is a very big and growing market. Whatever fields, like whatever tech niche you specialize in this country, it is applicable to every other country. It's a global market, so you can weigh your pros and cons, and the economy is booming for this field right now. Next two things I would say is that it makes you happy. Like for me personally, when things move and you get to see that you have written something and you have developed something and it is actually being put out in the real world and it's moving, you actually have that sense of joy when things start working, right? For example, if you are an automotive engineer and your code is running in the car, you feel good that you are the one who's written this part of the car, and now you can actually see it. You can actually physically feel it, or you can actually see it interacting with the real world. If you're in aerospace, you can see things flying, and then that makes you feel happy that you contributed to something that is making this thing fly or that thing fly. That is a very little, like, that is a joy that if you enjoy, you should consider working in this field. And if you got that skeptical mindset and you think that you enjoy solving everyday problems by actually physically doing something, like for example, I used to enjoy I used to really enjoy home automation during my college days. So I had hooked up a few relays and an IoT board to my home power circuit, and then I controlled things from my phone. So that was a very enjoyable thing that I like. That was a problem I solved for myself and something that I developed. So these are a few things one should pursue. One should rather think of pursuing a career in robotics. So I have mostly worked with startups in past 3 or 4 years, and most startups are pretty brutal. I'll just say it out loud. Right? I haven't really worked with much MNCs or much bigger companies. I have mostly been in the startup space for a long time. So this session would be more or less about my journey in startups, and not based on how a job is in MNC. So yeah, the startups are just brutal. That's all. In a startup, you have a lot of work pressure. In a startup, you have a lot of deadlines. You have sometimes you get hurt physically. Sometimes there are accidents in a startup. Startups, you have burnouts a lot of times. Just to sum it up, startups are, for me at least, they have been pretty brutal, and I've learned a lot of it during this process. My typical startup experience is that in a startup, things usually have to get going first before they touch the production phase. So I'm not an MBA, and this is a hype curve which almost every startup or every institute goes through when they start with a when they start with the business. So in a startup, typically you have the minimal viable product, which is the MVP phase or the tech segment phase, which is where all the grant work comes into play. You have to just push things to get going. That is really the aim of the management, or that is really what the upper management wants from you, is that they just want something that they can show and get more money, get more investment. This is technically the MVP phase, and this is the grant phase of the startup, right? So when during this phase, there are a lot of iterations. There's a lot of things blowing up. There's a lot of fakeness, or there's a lot of things that are just needed to be put out, not really in a functional manner, but overall in an ideation manner. So if you're joining a company that is in the MVP phase, your aim in the company would be not really innovation, but more of getting things working, or just getting things to go somewhere, so that the company can fetch more money or get more money from investors, and then they can try to build something bigger. For example, like my previous company, the e-plane company, I was in a phase where they were just trying to peak up the company, get it out in the open in the market. So they were just trying to build an eVTOL they had tried. So their innovation is a bit less in such a phase. You are most likely just pushing things to get going. Something similar happened during my time at Pravik Dynamics, where we were just trying to they were just trying to launch a EV vehicle, and yeah, and there was not much focus towards innovation and paying details to do tiny little things, but just to get things going. Then after that, they get funding, and then after the funding, you start actually building on the product. You start reevaluating everything, and then there's a destruction phase, and then again you start building things properly. Startups have been pretty brutal for me. So my current company is although a bit less brutal. It is, I would say, in the productivity phase right now. But even in my like my current company has a few products out, and it is in a SME state or a small medium enterprise state. It is not really in a startup state, but most startups you see, at least in India, are of 6 days a work week, which is like a very hectic schedule. 6 days a work week doesn't sound that intense, but you sum it over a year, and then you will experience a burnout. So you will experience that you don't really have a personal life. That is something I had personally felt when I was working in startups for around 2.5 years. So I decided to calm things down in this domain and move to a slightly more stable company. Startups will always have a less pay, and they will offer you ESOPs. Startups, like, you have to negotiate and be really chalu, or you have to be really on your feet when you are negotiating with your salary in these companies. So they usually have a limited amount of budget, and they don't really care about how much experience or how much talent you bring. They just need people, in my experience, to get things going before they actually start paying attention to the quality of work that you're doing. Early phase startups have also a lot of ESOPs that I would say that uh, so if you're joining a company and it's in the early stage, you can negotiate a good deal of ESOPs, so that in case the company grows out into something big in a few years, you would be having a good amount of money. A lot of my ex colleagues and a few of my ex roommates, they were working in Ether, and they had Ether stocks. Now Ether is planning to go public in a few in some time. So those who had those ESOPs, they will be able to cash out loads of money from that. So some startups turn out to be good, some startups turn out to be not so good. So be mindful of, like, whenever you are going into a startup, be mindful of your pay and ESOPs, and if ESOPs are really worth it. Um yeah, again, the next one would be unrealistic expectations and deadlines. So in startups, everything that I've personally experienced is about getting things to hype up as much as possible, and then getting some good investment before you can actually start a productivity. You can actually start production in real life. So if you're in the MVP phase of a company, and if you're in the MVP phase of a company, you'll be having a lot of there'll be a lot of unrealistic expectations and deadlines put on your head, which are not really practically feasible. So you have to be very smart about it, and you have to try to deliver as much as you can, and you have to really judge what you're doing in the company. So I know the session is about robotics, and I'm talking all about startups, but I'll get to the robotics parts eventually. I'm just starting with this topic first because that is something I feel very relevant once you join a company, or when you start working in a company which is a startup. And I'm focusing on this more because startups will give you a lot more exposure and growth than any big MNCs that you have. So if you're in the early stage of your companies, if you're early stage of your career, I would definitely recommend going to a few startups and learning and going through the grant phase before you join a big stable company and have a chill life. So this is why the first slide, or one of the first slides, is that I'm talking about this. Right, you should know where you are and which state you are in, when you should join the company, and when you should exit or stay. So if you know that you've reached a saturation point in a company, then that is usually a time when I would say that one should exit the company. Or if you have a good deal of ESOPs with a startup, you usually have to sign a 4-year contract with that company. And if you see a very good future with that company, and you have a good work-life balance, then I would recommend anyone to stay in the company. So it all boils down to personal preferences on how long should you be in each company, and when should you really switch a company, or when should you really be in the company. A very funny meme I found online, which was like, which is what I was trying to emphasize. So in startups, your first day, if you're just starting your career in robotics, you won't really know much. But 1 year down the line, you will have learned a lot more than you would have learned in any big MNC. So, as mentioned earlier, robotics is a field where you really need to have a domain knowledge and you need to be on your feet and you need to think critical things. So, this is not a field where you can. This is not a field where, like, this is a field where you need to have some base knowledge before you come into this field and start working on it. Unlike, l- like, people can do MBAs, people can do the job of an MBA without having an MBA degree, but or without having the base knowledge, but in robotics you need to have a domain knowledge of what you're doing. So when you're working with a company, you should ideally have a good domain knowledge on the field that you are trying to apply to, or your field you're trying to be in. If you're in the automotive segment or you're trying to be in the automotive segment, you should have a good amount of knowledge about the automotive segment and how it's working, at least a base knowledge. Or the same goes for aerospace or home automation or IoT. So I personally got my exposure to good domain knowledge from online courses and offline competitions. A few places from which I learned was I had done a few courses was Coursera, Udemy, Khan Academy. I had done a few courses from edX. I had done a few courses. These were based on these were my core conceptual courses based on fundamentals of robotics, C++, DSA, control systems. When you join a company as well, companies usually tie up with the online courses programs, and then you can, even in your company, spend an hour or half an hour or 1 hour a day every day at the end of the day, and learn new things. So that is a good thing of joining a company and learning as well. Robotics, you have one good thing about startups and early stage companies is that you get to see things hands on. You actually get to work on the product that you're going to build or something that you're going to ship. If it's a big MNC or a major MNC, you will be just writing code and it will be shipped outside somewhere. You won't know what happened of it. So my ex colleagues in GM, they were working on key fobs for a car in USA, and then they wrote a feature for it. It went on for months and months and months, and then in the end, this feature was scraped off. So like my ex colleagues, like often that's why they crib that they don't know what they did actually in the 1 year or 2 years of a big company, right? It goes through several layers of approvals, and then you really don't know if it's going to be implemented, if it's not going to be implemented. You don't really feel the satisfaction that you have actually done something. It's just that you have written a few lines of code, that's all. So in early stage companies, at least you get to see things hands on, you get to burn stuff, you get to build stuff. That is a nice thing. So critical thinking, that is where critical thinking comes into play. So you get to see what you're doing, so you can see the feedback. You see that this is going wrong, you get instant feedback, and then you work on it again, and then you get more feedback. Everything is on your feet when you are in a robotics thing or in the startup phase. Everything is impromptu, everything is on field. For example, for me, at least in my current company and even in at ePlane, we used to have a lot of times we used to go on field tests, and we used to fly drones, and we used to fly other defense projects. So when you're on the field, you need to be always on your feet. You need to think what can go wrong, what cannot go wrong. Tiny things or the minute things which you don't even think during development phase, they come out into picture. Like Did you really did you really choose to auto start the module? Did you make sure that the module was set on auto start? If not, are you going to really pull out your laptop in the middle of the field, connect it to the machine, and manually start it? So these are tiny niche things that robotics or being it teaches you to be on your field. That is a very good thing as an engineer, I would say. Even in software, a lot of times, until the product is not deployed, you don't realize the mistakes that you've made. So here everything is live, so you have to be on your feet. That is a very interesting thing of robotics. You can't be slacking off and say ki, oh, I'll do this later, I'll do that later. You meet a lot of industry leaders. Like for me, at least, I've met a lot of great people amongst the 3 or 4 companies that I've been. Startups have a lot of startups are chaos, and a lot of good people often come and go. People have different expectations from different startups, so you'll meet all kinds of people in early stage companies. So you'll have a lot of KD sessions. You'll have a lot of good connects with people, and you can discuss on a wide variety of things, which is not really so much in a big MNC. In a big MNC, it will be mostly based on some major company going to some campus and then hiring hiring a big amount of crowd. So it'll be a very standardized crowd, and big companies over small companies will have a very varying and dynamic crowd. These are like some things that I really enjoy or really find interesting about this domain or working in early stage companies. So yeah, I would definitely recommend whoever is attending this, like, please do check out or do start improving on these things. This is a general robotics framework. So anyone who is not aware of anything in the robotics, any machine or any system works like this. Like you have a set of sensors. So given any autonomous system in this world, it's more or less high level. Basic framework is this: you will have a set of sensors. You will map the environment using those sensors. You will perceive your environment with this. You will plan the motion. You will write a controller loop for that, and then you will be controlling actuators. So any robotics problem can be cut down into this architecture. So the one on the left is that of an autonomous driving system. The one on the right is that of an autonomous drone. It's the same kind of logic in both this and both the images, right? You have a vehicle, you have sensors, you take feedback from the sensors, you perceive your environment around it, you make a path around it, you send that path to a path manager or a controller, and then you send those values to your actuators. Any given system can be briefly cut down into these things, which is like sensors, mapping, planning, controller, and actuation. So, in robotics, you have if you have a good grasp on all these 5 things, you are a good robotics engineer. That is what I would say. A very nice diagram I found online, which is the map of control theory. So since TimesPro, this is a machine learning course. I assume a lot of fundamental concepts of control theory and your machine learning overlap. So this diagram like actually like maps out everything that you need to do for a control system, right? It's just a fancy diagram that I found, and I thought of sharing with you guys, right? It contains, like, if you know this diagram, you can solve almost any robotics problem in the world. Then only comes the part of actuating and like the middle part. This diagram covers the middle part of your robotics, which is like from perception, planning to controllers. Then is the only part of sensors and actuation. So a very nice diagram, I thought, and I that's why I just put it here. Um, yeah, then again, building foundation projects and competitions. So for me personally, I started my journey by doing a lot of courses and competitions during my college days and pre-college days. I used to just pick up any topic, and I would think of a project on that. Like I would think of um, home automation topic. So I just thought, uh, like a very simple example, like home automation. I would just try to play with the circuit boards or get some controllers at home. Try to see if I can control it via IoT. Can I set up a server? Can I hook it up to my Wi-Fi? Can I write a script to control it? Then can I build an app for that? So just find any problem that you see in everyday life and think if you can do anything about it. So then one more thing was came, which was for I worked for a competition which was for electrostatic precipitators behind a vehicle. So we were trying to collect exhaust suit of a vehicle. So a very simple thought was that we can have a high voltage coil behind the exhaust, and uh, that would just attract all the suit. That would just ionize the suit and then deposit it back on a plate. So we actually tried building it. I spent a lot of money. I got electrocuted. We were trying with 10,000 volts of a high voltage converter. So we managed to ionize some smoke and then deposit it somewhere. So the foundation phase is where like you get to play around things, you get to burn stuff, you get some damage basically. You fail a lot, fail fast and learn fast. So that phase, just find any project, just find any projects to go through. Just buy a few microcontrollers and think of all the possible things that you can do. Some people, like for example, Hacker Day is a very good website. They have a lot of competitions. You can go check it out. They post a problem solution, and then there are entries to have a solution for that. There are projects for watering plants, like self-watering plant project, or like there are tons of issues every day in just household items as well. So that is how I started my journey, and I would recommend anyone looking to start a journey, just to pick up anything random and start thinking around things. Like for example, I think here I have I had burned down my transmitter module a few years ago, like for radio transmitter. So I have this uh, I have this motherboard of it. Like I shipped it from Hong Kong, and there was not a reverse protection diode behind it. So uh, like try so you burn things down, you try to fix them up. So then when you try to fix them things when you try to fix things up, you will notice that a lot of things come into play. So when I have to fix this motherboard into my new transmitter, I have to also flash this micro flash this microcontroller and then map the peripherals with my joystick. So it's fun, it's time consuming. It's a growth phase. You're just failing in this phase, or you're just burning money and learning things. That's all. um, then one more thing that you can, if you're just getting started into this field, is like pick up a random college fest and participate in competitions. This is how I used to work during my college days. There was like in Mumbai there used to be a lot of colleges and tech fests. So there used to be two competitions that were there usually in almost all colleges of Mumbai. So there was always a line follower bot competition, and then there was always a micro mouse competition. So I spent around 6 months trying to build both of these bots, and then I used to take them to every competition, and then every competition I used to reiterate something, and make them. So that is where you're failing and learning things in a robotics domain. Same goes for DSA competitions. These are online competitions as well. Google, Code for Earth, AWS, Amazon. Every day there's a new competition. So for if you're just going want to practice your DSA or your hands at programming, these are always there. Yeah, these are the two simple startup projects that I mentioned about. And anyone can try that. It doesn't take really much. Line follower board is like the standard, most standard thing in any college, in any robotics course that you are going to learn. Home automation and IoT. It's pretty fun to play around. It doesn't really require much. There's no control and kinematics and physics involved there. It's simple logic, and you can actually see things going in and out. You learn a lot about networking in this. From this, learn a lot about physical relays and optocouplers and core electronics, and how do you isolate things. So just start with projects and just read up online and see how other people are doing. Try to copy them. Try to put something of your own in that. A few of the books that I've come across for robotics have been Probabilistic Robotics, Clean Code, and Pragmatic Programmer. There are way too many good books, which I can't put it here because I haven't personally read them, or I haven't personally uh, gone through them. I wouldn't really recommend them, but there are a lot of good books out there. These are three books that I have personally been in touch with or have been reading in and out just as a references from time to time. So these are the books that actually helped me build a good foundation as well. So if you do happen to buy them, or if you even online variants are available as well, so do check them out. I would recommend that. Back during COVID days, everything was on lockdown, so I used to go to these meetups online. So there's this beautiful website called Meetups, where people of like-minded community can. There are community events. So it's not just for robotics; it's for anything in general, be it cooking, blockchain, be it board games, be it anything in general, coffee, catch-ups. Um, Meetups is a very good concept that I have enjoyed. So I used to. These are the two groups I used to participate in, or just talk to people around the world on meetups. This was back during COVID days. I don't really know if these are still active, but I had a good amount of connections with these groups. Like I had talked with a few good people and got an understanding of how things are happening on the other side of the world. Yeah, then again comes the phase of actually joining a startup. So or joining a company. So once you have a good amount of major domain knowledge, once you have had some content to put in your resume, then you can actually start applying to companies rather than just going ahead with a blank resume. So I'm just going to share some tips and some tricks, or just some directions on how I got my jobs, and how, if you want to have jobs in these companies, how you can approach as well. So like I started with I started with the automotive industry first because I thought EVs were cool at the time. So that is how I had approached Pravik Dynamics. Uh, so I found out about the company. I reached out to the HRs. I reached out to the CEO. You find their listings often on LinkedIn, Glassdoor. So you choose a domain, you find a few companies in that domain, and then you start applying. So I actually, during the start of my career, I had actually very, very high hopes of getting into big tier one OEMs. So I had actually applied to around 200 or 300 companies, or I don't even remember, but like I had a list of around 350, 400 companies where I had applied. So big companies wouldn't really prefer candidates at higher positions who are freshers or who don't have much experience. It is mostly small companies looking to hire freshers, where also, which is also a good thing for someone looking in, for someone starting to get into this field, because of the intense exposure that you have, and also the growth that you have. So startups are much more likely to respond to a fresher over big MNCs, and MNCs, if you are going, you will be given with mundane or boring tasks. In a startup, you will be like, you won't be really innovating much in big companies at the start of your career. It'll be mostly documentation and sideline stuff. The innovation part comes with senior positions in big companies. In small companies, you directly get to the innovation phase without all the without all the bullshit of circling around and without being on the sidelines. That is a good thing. So I would that is something I would highly recommend. Then job hunting, people can approach, like I used to at least approach HRs. I used to approach tech engineers in different companies. I used to cold mail them. I used to put LinkedIn messages. I used to connect with every engineer I wanted in on LinkedIn from that company, and then send emails to them. Basically, cold mailing is a good strategy. I've had a lot of interviews, or I have a lot of connects with cold mails, just by cold mails itself, both in India, outside India as well. Then there's discussion forums and job portals. So a lot of times, a lot of groups have discussion forums, right? So automotive discussion forums, or PX4 discussion forums, or like PX4 is a autopilot, for those who don't know, and it has a good Discord forum. So there, that is somewhere a lot of good jobs are posted. A few based in Bangalore itself are posted. A few outside of India. That is also a good place where you can actually like literally like directly connect with the tech engineers who want the job over the website. Then it goes to HR. Then it goes to tech engineers. So you can bypass a few layers of filtering just by connecting directly with the people who want the engineers. Then there's again the old school traditional methods of friends and family referrals. College campuses do give some robotics placements, although I haven't. Although I during my time there weren't many. Then one interesting thing is you can also do tech expos and job fairs. So a lot of times tech expos happen worldwide. You can just buy tickets for these expos, and you can just go and meet each and every company. So people are there, representatives are there. Usually one or two HRs are there. So a lot of times the engineers who are building the product, they themselves come to these tech expos to get in touch with clients and people. So a lot of times you can directly talk with the engineers in charge, and you can slide in your resume with them directly. That is also a good way to get a job. Freelancing, I have had just one freelancing experience. Freelancing is actually, like for me at least, uh, outside of India, if you're getting a remote freelancing opportunity, they pay very well. In India, you have to be a bit of a bit skeptical about freelancing opportunities. But again, if you have free time on your hand and if you don't have a job at the moment, you can always try for freelancing opportunities. There are a lot of people on LinkedIn who are looking for part-time contracts, or small enterprises looking for simple solutions. So you can try approaching them. You can try Upwork. I have been in touch with few international clients. So they pay, although they pay a lot of money, but then you really need to cut out that much time to work with them. So for me at least, quitting my job and doing freelancing has been so far a bit skeptical. So I haven't really gone ahead with that. You can also try asking companies, so over full-time jobs. You can just work part-time for a project, for a little bit of service or something. So this is just my brief experience so far on actually getting a job and having a career in robotics. So yeah, like I had mentioned, burnouts and safety issues and work-life balance in a robotics company, or in a fast-paced startup. So you don't want to be always on your feet, and you don't want to be working all the time and just doing work, 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 and have no personal life. Uh, So you should learn how to balance between your work life and your personal life, and how do you strike a good balance between them. Also, a lot of times I had put it at the start of the PPT that um, safety is a big concern, and like safety is a big concern in robotics industry. So I, I'll be just talking a few points on that. That's all, and then we can move to the Q&A session, right? So I've had a few workplace related accidents, which is why I am always personally skeptical. So I had been caught in the crossfire of a battery accident. My hand had gone, like I had a third degree burn or something on my hand, which is not pretty at all. When you're working with batteries, or when you're working with BMSs, or when you're working with LiPo batteries or EV batteries, a lot of times during development phases, accidents are bound to happen. Things are going to get blown up. There's going to be massive amounts of fire. A lot of times when you're flying drones, or when you're working with multicopters, if you're not really careful of your location, if you're not really careful of where you are, what you're doing, the propellers can cut you up. I've witnessed a few workplace accidents myself. I've been involved in a few. So always be a skeptic. Always be skeptical of things when you're working. Like, will this can this thing go wrong? You have built it. It's not been tested yet. Can this thing go wrong? If this is going to go wrong, what's the worst that can happen? Always have fire extinguishers nearby. Always have medical kits nearby. I would always recommend to invest in your own. Like, I at least personally do invest in my own personal safety. Then, the company, waiting for the company to do something. If you're in a factory, wear proper shoes. The company is not responsible in case something goes wrong. So wear proper shoes if you're going in a factory. Wear proper shoes if you're going in the field. Make sure to maintain safe distance from batteries if they are just being put to charge. LiPo batteries often catch fire, so make sure you don't leave them unattended. Things burn, and when things burn, it's not pretty. A lot of fatalities have happened. A lot of people have died in this process. Uh, like for example, the 2022, 2023 Ola scooters used to burst up because of poor engineering, right? So uh, that was one major accident. Tesla car fire accidents. Tesla has had accidents, workplace accidents, because of not proper safety measurements. I have personally witnessed pilots in my company getting cuts, like getting the hands cut because it was caught in a propeller. They were not handling the drone or the fixed vehicle properly. Then the Titanic sub explosion, this Ocean Gate Titanic submarine exploded. That was like that's a very sad thing that happened. It was also because of poor engineering design. So the company is not responsible for your safety. I would keep on saying that again and again. You as an employee, or you as a engineer, are responsible for your own safety. So had the people had the like they were college students who had been working with Titan at the time, Ocean Gate. So for them it's a cool thing to go to the bottom of Titanic and then see it and come back. But they don't realize the fatalities that are involved with it. Same goes for my like X2X at Praveg. 4 people died recently in a car accident. They were not wearing proper safety equipment, or some workplace accident. So it's not pretty at the end of the day when you lose someone, when you're close, when your colleagues die, or someone die, or something because of you has killed someone, or something because of you has damaged someone, or you could have done something about it. So because I have been involved in this, I feel this is like a very sort out topic on which people don't really talk much, which is why I always tend to bring up this. Then there's also this burnouts. So if you're working in the company and it's trying to squeeze you, you're getting burned out in that company, you need to raise it up, and you need to uh, you need to raise those topics up, and then it is your responsibility that you're not getting burned up, you're not getting overly stressed in those companies or in those situations. A lot of times immoral things are also done in companies just to get things going, get things uh, just to get things shown up for the investors. And if you don't agree with it, maybe you should not work up with it. These are just my personal perspective. If you think that if a company is doing something which is morally wrong, then maybe you should not do it. Like for example, for the Ola scooty things, like the engineers knew that the cells were unstable or the design was unstable, but still the management made them push it ahead, and a lot of people, a lot of people were, a lot of lives were lost because of the earlier Ola phases of scooties. Like that is not a pretty thing. So that is something as an engineer, if you morally feel something is wrong and you feel this is not right, you should not do it. You should also not be scared of calling out BS if you see something is wrong, something is wrong with the management, and they are trying to push things in one way, and you think it's not proper, then you should say things out loud, because if you don't say things, nothing changes. So things are driven by economics, and then they're built by engineers. Or so you should always have a again the same thing that I've been trying since the start of the lecture. You should always be on your feet. You should always be skeptical about things, and try to be a proper engineer. That's all my that's all my this is. Few companies are there. So in big companies, things have procedures. In big companies, things have proper procedures, proper statement of processes for things on how things should go from in a safety wise manner. So there these things don't come up, but in small companies they do, and then that is where you need to have your mindfulness into picture. I think I've taken up too much of the time. We can move to Q&A. uh,
There's one question I wanted to ask, Param. I wanted
uh-huh.
to ask you about, can you just explain it to me? The one good thing about being a robotics engineer, that one thing which you feel.
Yeah, yeah. One thing would be you actually get to see things working, right? That gives you a joy that you have built something and it's working now. That is something I would. That is something which I like very much. That's all.
I think there are no questions as of now. Quickly, I'll just give an introduction about the program. And people, if you have any question, you can just post it in the Q&A section. We will take it from there. Right. Also, thank you very much, Param, because this was a really enlightening session. Me being from a non-tech industry, also I enjoyed this session a lot, and it was really valuable for me to understand what is going on in this particular industry as well. So thank you so much, and your passion for robotics and wealth of knowledge have been truly inspiring, and we are grateful for your valuable insights. Also, if anyone over here is looking to build a career into robotics, we have a chance where you can actually turn your dream into reality. There's one program from TimesPro, which is executive program offered by IIT Delhi, which will equip you with the skills and knowledge to thrive in this dynamic field. I am posting the link into the chat. You can also quickly have a look of the program. Till the time I'll be explaining the details of that particular program. So this is a 5-month online program which will offer an immersive exploration into robotics with live online sessions from IIT Delhi faculty and leading industry experts. So you will learn topics like fundamentals of robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and embedded control. Also, throughout the program, you'll engage in hands-on projects, allowing you to design and build your own robot prototype. Also, upon completion, you'll receive an e-certificate from CEP IIT, which will add significant value to your professional credential. The curriculum is also supported by tools, tutorials, and career support also is offered from TimesPro itself. So this is actually offering a comprehensive learning experience that can propel your career forward, right? So definitely check it out. Also, there any questions? Okay, so I think we have no questions. In case, if you feel in the later stage, if you have a certain queries or if you want to get some doubts resolved, you can definitely reach out to Param or Times Pro. We will be happy to, solve your queries directly. So once again, I would like to thank Mr. Param and to each one of the audience here. So your active participation and enthusiasm have made this session engaging and memorable. And we have many more sessions lined up in the future, so make sure to stay tuned with Times Pro. Thank you.